Many of you know, I beat breast cancer, and I've always been a fighter. Treatment for cancer can lead to other serious medical issues.
She smiles into a camera every single morning, and millions of people trust that smile to get them through their day. But almost nobody outside her innermost circle knows exactly what it costs her to show up like that, especially now, at 65, carrying 2 cancer diagnoses, a bone marrow transplant, and a body that has been rebuilt from scratch. This is the real story of Robin Roberts, the woman who turned her own survival into a public service, and who is still quietly fighting battles the audience never sees. Robin Roberts has spent nearly 2 decades as one of the most recognizable faces in American television, the steady, warm presence at the anchor desk of Good Morning America. What viewers see is the polish, the easy laugh, the sharp interviews, the effortless transition from breaking news to a heartfelt human interest story. What they rarely see is the machinery behind it, the years of medical trauma that shaped the woman sitting in that chair, and the discipline it takes for her to keep showing up at an hour when most of the country is still asleep. The story of Robin's health struggles begins in the summer of 2007. At the time, she was already a rising star at ABC, having transitioned from a respected career in sports journalism into the far more visible world of daytime network news. Then came a routine self-exam that changed everything. Robin found a lump in her breast, and after a mammogram that came back looking normal, a follow-up ultrasound her doctor had also ordered caught what the first test missed. A biopsy confirmed the fear. She had triple-negative breast cancer, a particularly aggressive form of the disease that lacks the hormone receptors doctors typically target with treatment, and one that disproportionately affects Black women with worse outcomes. Robin has said she didn't even know what the term meant when she first heard her diagnosis. Rather than retreat from the public eye, Robin made the decision that would define the rest of her career. She chose to share her diagnosis with her audience instead of hiding it, turning what could have been a private crisis into an open, ongoing conversation. She underwent surgery, months of chemotherapy, and 6 weeks of radiation, and she did much of it while still appearing on air. She talked candidly about the exhaustion, the physical toll, and the moment her hair began to fall out. Rather than concealing it, she let her viewers see her without it. That choice reshaped the conversation around beauty and illness for a generation of women watching at home. Her treatment worked. The cancer went into remission, and for 5 years, life returned to something like normal. Then, in January of 2012, on the same day Good Morning America celebrated finally overtaking its longtime rival in the ratings after years of trying, Robin got a call that would upend everything again. New blood work revealed she had myelodysplastic syndrome, or MDS, a rare disorder in which the bone marrow stops producing enough healthy blood cells. Left untreated, it frequently progresses into acute leukemia. The particularly cruel part of the diagnosis was its cause. Doctors believed her MDS was very likely a secondary effect of the same aggressive chemotherapy and radiation that had saved her life 5 years earlier. The treatment that cured one disease had quietly planted the seed for another. Unlike breast cancer, which at least felt familiar to her, Robin has said she had never even heard of MDS before her own diagnosis. The only viable path forward was a bone marrow transplant, a grueling process that would require her doctors to essentially destroy her existing immune system before attempting to rebuild it with donor cells. Finding a match is difficult under the best circumstances, and even harder for Black patients, who remain underrepresented on international bone marrow registries. Robin's 3 older siblings were all tested, and statistically, the odds at any sibling matches are only about 30%. Her brother Lawrence wasn't a match. Her sister Dorothy wasn't a match. Then came the news that her sister Sally Ann Roberts, a longtime television journalist in her own right, was a near-perfect match. In late August of 2012, Robin stepped away from Good Morning America and entered isolation at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. To prepare her body for the transplant, doctors gave her extremely high doses of chemotherapy designed to wipe out her failing bone marrow entirely. Robin, a former Division I basketball player who stood 5'10", watched her weight drop to a startling 115 pounds. She underwent the transplant on September 20th, 2012, receiving stem cells donated by her sister. In the weeks that followed, she lived through an agonizing, uncertain recovery, confined to a hospital room, waiting each morning for blood counts that would determine whether she was allowed even a short walk down the hallway. The emotional weight of that period became almost unbearable when Robin's mother, Lussa Marion, passed away that same month. Robin was too weak and too medically fragile to travel home for the funeral, and she has spoken since about how profoundly that loss compounded the physical suffering of her recovery. She has described a night when her condition became so serious that she felt herself slipping, and it was. The steady presence of a nurse at her bedside, calling her name and anchoring her back, that she credits with helping pull her through. Slowly, her sister's donated cells took hold. She passed the critical 100-day milestone that December without developing graft-versus-host disease, one of the most dangerous complications of a transplant like hers. In February of 2013, 174 days after she'd left the anchor desk, Robin walked back onto the set of Good Morning America and delivered the line that millions still remember. She'd been waiting 174 days to say Good Morning, America. The ripple effect of her going public reached far beyond her own recovery. In the days after she first shared her MDS diagnosis on air, reports of the time noted a dramatic surge in people signing up for bone marrow donor registries, with some accounts describing an increase of roughly 1,000% in the 24 hours that followed. Over the years since, hundreds of thousands of additional donors have joined national registries, many citing Robin's story as the reason. It's a legacy she has leaned into deliberately, becoming an outspoken advocate for expanding donor registries, particularly among communities of color who remain underrepresented among both donors and patients who find a match in time. Throughout all of this, Robin was not walking the road alone, even if the public didn't know it for years. She had met Amber Lane, a massage therapist, on a blind date back in 2005. For the better part of a decade, their relationship stayed almost entirely out of public view, a decision shaped by an industry and an era in which openly gay news anchors were rare and often professionally risky. Amber was there through the breast cancer diagnosis, through the MDS scare, and through the long transplant recovery, largely unseen by the audience who thought they knew everything about Robin's life. It wasn't until the very end of 2013, in a quiet social media post reflecting on her recovery, that Robin publicly thanked her, in her words, longtime girlfriend. The reaction from fans was overwhelmingly supportive, a sign of just how much trust Robin had built with her audience over the years. Their story continued to deepen from there, including a period when Amber herself faced a breast cancer diagnosis, putting Robin in the unfamiliar position of caregiver rather than patient. After nearly 2 decades together, the couple finally married on September 8, 2023, in a backyard ceremony at their home in Farmington, Connecticut, officiated by Robin's childhood pastor, with her brother walking her down the aisle. By their own account, part of what has kept their relationship steady through so much hardship is an unusually independent approach to marriage, including maintaining separate homes even after the wedding, a small detail that speaks to how deliberately they've built a partnership on their own terms rather than anyone else's expectations. Long before any of this, though, Robin built an entirely different kind of career, one rooted in athletics rather than journalism. She grew up in a family that placed enormous value on discipline and excellence. Her father, Lawrence Roberts, was one of the historic Tuskegee Airmen. Robin found her own outlet on the basketball court, eventually playing for Southeastern Louisiana University, where she became one of only a handful of players in the program's history to reach both 1,000 career points and 1,000 rebounds. Her number was later retired by the university, and she was inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. That athletic drive carried directly into her broadcasting career. Robin has said she once wrote down a specific goal for herself, to work at ESPN by 1990, and treated that written date as a promise to keep. She spent years working her way up through smaller television markets across the South before ESPN hired her in February of 1990, precisely on the timeline she'd set for herself. She became the network's first black woman to anchor SportsCenter, breaking into an industry that was, at the time, overwhelmingly male and largely closed off to women who wanted to cover hard sports rather than sideline fluff. Over roughly 15 years at ESPN, she became the first woman to co-host the network's flagship NFL primetime show, covered multiple Olympic Games, and earned 2 Emmy Awards, cementing her reputation well before she ever sat behind the Good Morning America desk. Her move to ABC in the mid-2000s eventually placed her alongside Diane Sawyer and Charles Gibson as co-anchor, and her natural warmth quickly set her apart from the more formal, distant style that had defined morning anchors before her. That warmth was tested in the most public and painful way possible just months into her new role, when Hurricane Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast in August of 2005. Robin grew up in Pass Christian, Mississippi, a small coastal town that was almost entirely destroyed by the storm. For days, she had no way of knowing whether her own mother and sister had survived. When she finally reported live from the wreckage of her hometown, she did something journalists are traditionally trained to avoid. She let her composure break on camera, visibly grieving alongside the community she was covering. That moment resonated deeply with viewers, and it helped define the emotionally honest style that would eventually carry Good Morning America to the top of the morning ratings in 2012, finally overtaking a rival that had dominated the time slot for well over a decade. Today, at 65, Robin carries all of it: the cancer, the transplant, the lingering fatigue that can come with years of intense treatment, and the discipline required to keep a demanding early morning television schedule going. She has spoken openly about ongoing effects like neuropathy in her fingers and toes, a common lingering consequence of the chemotherapy that saved her life nearly 2 decades ago, and about the general toll of managing her health as she gets older. Rather than slowing down, she has expanded into new creative territory through her production company, developing documentary and film projects, including one exploring the hidden history of enslaved laborers who helped build the White House. She has also returned to her athletic roots, providing commentary around the surging popularity of women's basketball, a sport she helped shape decades earlier as a broadcasting pioneer. What makes Robin Roberts' story resonate isn't that she avoided hardship. It's that she absorbed an extraordinary amount of it: cancer twice over, a bone marrow transplant, the loss of her mother during her sickest moment, years of keeping a major relationship private out of necessity, and still found a way to keep showing up, both for her own life and for an audience that has watched her do it in real time. She has never pretended the road was easy, and she has never asked anyone to feel sorry for her either. What she has done, consistently, is turn her own private struggle into something useful for other people. Whether that's encouraging strangers to register as bone marrow donors, modeling what an honest conversation about cancer treatment can look like, or simply proving that a woman who's been through what she has can still walk out onto a stage every morning and mean it when she says good morning to the world. That more than any single headline about her health is the real story behind the smile.